UFC Edmonton was a solid card overall. We had 13 fights. Yes, there were only 4 finishes, but even the 9 decisions were bangers overall and a couple of contenders for fight of the night. My name is Angelo. This is We Want Picks, and I'm going to recap the entire UFC Edmonton fight card. Before we talk about the fights, let's talk about the bets, and this was another winning week for the We Want Picks boys. Jakey Boy and I both independently were up money. Combined, you got about 4 units of profit, a 33% return on your investment. And if you're new here, I encourage you to go back to the other recap videos so you can see that 9 of the last 10 events we were up money. The only event that gave us a little bit of trouble was UFC Paris. This card specifically was just okay for me, and it was very good for Jakey Boy. I hit my Alexandr Romanov money line at plus money. If you watch the quick pick videos, you got that free teaser. My Mike Malott, Munhoz, Zahabi over 2.5 parlay hit, and the plus money safety parlay hit as well. Safety parlay 4 weeks in a row at plus money. That's absolutely spectacular. I almost hit the over 2.5 on the ladies. I missed that by 3 seconds, thanks to Jasmine Jazz Delicious, but we'll break that fight down a little bit. Jacob basically hit every single bet except the lock of the week. And that is obviously unfortunate, but overall phenomenal night. And that's what this is about, right? This is about breaking down fights, giving you some insight, giving you some bets, giving you tools, picks, and other stuff like that. UFC Edmonton was very good to us. We appreciate you, and hopefully you appreciate us. And if you do appreciate us, you can go to WeWantPicks.com, click Become a Member, and unlock all the bets for UFC Vegas 100, which is next week. The bets did well. So did the DraftKings ownership projections. Basically, every single week, we've got the best ownership projection on the planet. These are the results from UFC Edmonton. We had a 3.04% margin of error. Nobody was even close. Nobody. The next closest was 3.99, basically an entire point difference. These ownership projections were loaded into the DraftKings optimizer, so if you use the optimizer, hopefully you built some winning lineups and made a couple of bucks. If you do want to unlock all the tools, like the data analyzer, the line movement tracker, the prop hunter, the DraftKings optimizer, as I mentioned, preloaded with those ownership projections, every single thing that we do, all the picks, the bets, the artificial intelligence, everything. It's only $10 for an entire month. UFC 309 is around the corner. That will be included. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. Every single freaking week, we're here putting up some winning bets. Let's talk about this card. It started off a little sketchy. I'm going to be honest with you. We started off with Jamey-Lyn Horth and Ivana Petrovic. And I did not agree with that decision. I'm fine with it. It is what it is, especially because Jacob had a parlay with Horth in it. But I don't think Horth really should have won that fight, let alone 30-27. Overall, it was a kind of a sloppy back and forth. Horth tried to establish dominance in the striking and really couldn't do that. Ivana would just hold her against the cage, work in a takedown. They'd hit the ground and Horth was just clueless on the ground. Clueless. And that's a little unfair because she did throw up an armbar, a tight armbar that looked pretty close. And apparently that was enough to win her a round. Being on her back the entire time with an armbar was apparently enough to win her a round. Which is crazy considering she was thrown to the ground. She was taken down. She didn't want to be down there, but that's where she ended up. And the judges still were like, yeah, no, she did a good job. With an armbar, that went nowhere. It was kind of a back and forth fight. This is what I'll say. Jamey-Lyn Horth kind of sucks at grappling. Ivana Petrovic was decent everywhere. Her striking looked okay. The grappling looked decent. Wrestling looked decent. Cage control was there. Jamie was tough, gritty. They both were tough. I don't necessarily think Jamie won this fight, let alone a 30-27. When I heard 30-27 for Jamey-Lyn Horth, I was like, here we go. This is going to be a night. And I bet against a few Canadians. Overall, the judging seemed to have right itself, but there was a lot of razor-thin fights. This was one of them. Not a lot of takeaways here. Not a lot of Ivana, I think, kind of got screwed a little bit. She's a good fighter. I think she'll have some success. Jamey-Lyn Horth is an okay fighter. I just don't know. I mean, what is there to talk about? Where are these? What are they going to do? Neither one of them are going to fight for a title, go on any sort of meaningful winning streak. So it was an entertaining fight, but it is what it is. This fight, on the other hand, Cody Gibson versus Chad Anheliger. This was a fun fight to watch because Cody Gibson came out, was getting touched up a little bit. Chad was landing nice, clean exchanges. And then Cody's like, yeah, I'm done with this. We're going to grapple. Took him down, had no problems at all. Cody absolutely dominated the grappling. Like, it was not even a little bit close for a half a second. He almost had multiple submissions. He was raining down blows. It was crazy. But every time they were standing, Chad would just let his hands go. He fought like a man, planted his feet, let his hands go, tried to make something happen. Ultimately, he couldn't. Cody was just too damn big and too good at grappling. One thing that was odd, though, is Cody tried a head and arm choke literally about 10 times. No joke. About 10 times he tried the head and arm choke. And it was like really close one time. The rest of the times there was like you could stick a whole arm in there. There was so much room. And it made no sense because Cody's very clearly a good grappler. So I don't know why he just could not get that pretty basic choke. But overall, Cody dominated this fight. That's his second win in a row. 2 wins in the last 10 years in the UFC. He's not a young gentleman by any means, but he has shown up enormous and telling people that he can win fights. He can move forward. He can get the takedowns. And if he's on the ground, he can do really well. So Cody looked good. Chad fought like an absolute man. I don't know what that's going to do for his career, but he swung when he could. And then on the ground, basically was just in survival mode the whole time. Then we had a razor-thin decision here as well. You could have given this to Garrett Armfield. Sidey did a little more on the ground. I think ultimately that was the difference here. But we had Sidey and Garrett Armfield. The striking was pretty back and forth. Sidey seemed to do better at range. Garrett would close that distance, throw a bunch of strikes, and just stay busy. This was a fun back and forth fight. No round was super clear. Every single round could have gone either direction for the most part. Garrett would get a takedown, then on the ground, Sidey would wrap up what looked like a meaningful choke, kind of lose it, wrap up something else that looked meaningful, kind of lose it. So if you're watching those grappling exchanges, it just depends, I guess, what era you're from. Because if you're the old school kind of guy and you've been watching fights forever, then you're just using the top control, what Garrett is doing. And you're saying, well, he got the takedown and he's on top, so that scores. Or if you're this new generation where it matters if you're trying to finish the fight, if it matters who's closer, damage, etc., well then Sidey, because while there wasn't a ton of damage, Sidey was the one looking for submissions, trying the guillotine, trying different submission techniques off bottom, while Garrett was just on top with control. So it was a very close fight. I'm sure some people who bet on Garrett are pissed, and some, it is what it is. Obviously, Sidey won that fight, but it wasn't crazy enough in either side for you to call it a robbery by any means whatsoever. So Sidey's going to be interesting to watch in the future because there's a lot of holes to plug. He was taken down a little too easily at times. He doesn't do as well with pressure as he should, considering how long he is, what a good striker he is, how dangerous he can be. He does not like if you're in his face. So hopefully Armfield isn't too discouraged because this is the best he's looked in a while. He was busy with his hands. His wrestling looked good. Like, Armfield looked good overall. So he was just a little too long and did a little too much on the ground. Then we have the return of Alexandr Romanov. The big boy is back. I bet on him at plus 115, and he soared to like minus 160 or something crazy like that. And I'm glad I got him at plus money because I would not have bet him at minus money. I took a risk betting him at plus money. And if you listen to that breakdown early in the week, I was like, man, on paper, Rodrigo is built to beat him. He's got good takedown defense and he can strike. But I just believe in Romanov. I'm seeing that he's competing in wrestling competitions. I'm seeing that he's doing other things. And hopefully he's not a fat mess. And while this picture doesn't do amazing things for his breasts, what I do need to express here is that he looked pretty good in this fight. It was a full decision. He had a lot of wrestling and some big wrestling movements, meaning he literally picked Romanov picked Nascimento up and slammed him to the ground more than one time. They'd be in this position. Nascimento would stand up. Romanov would pick him clean off the ground and dump him. Those are big movements that require a lot of energy. And Romanov did it more than one time and didn't gas. Of course, he slowed down. These are heavyweights. Of course, he slowed down, and in the third round, towards the end, his hands are low, and he's just lunging big punches. But he worked. He didn't quit. He backed up a little bit, but he didn't quit. He worked. He looked good. This is a very clear, straightforward win. I'm glad I bet on him, and I'm glad I wasn't a complete coward. Listen, I put a half a unit on him. And I know people like to give me a hard time for half a unit here, quarter of a unit there. But the reality is, I am up constantly. I am constantly making money. I am consistently making money. And I am a very reasonable person. So if you are new to betting on UFC and you stumbled across the channel and you said, oh, let me go to the website, sign up. It's $10. What could I possibly have to lose? And then you make a couple money, a couple dollars here and there. That's me. That's my style. Couple dollars here and there. I'll put up 3.5 units, 4.5 units a week. I'm not going to bet 38 units. I'm not going to lay out $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a week in the hopes to make a couple $100 and be like, oh, no, I'm a reasonable person. I find bets that I think make sense. If I'm very confident, it's a unit. If I'm not confident, it's less than that. So in this case, I am glad I was confident enough to do a half a unit because many times with an underdog, I'll do a quarter. So I did a half, doubled that money. Happy about it. I don't know what we're going to do next with Romanov because obviously he's lost to the upper echelon guys. He's lost to all of the upper echelon guys and then Marcin Tybura. I think he needs more fights like this. I think we need to build his confidence. I honestly think as big and wrestle heavy and foreign as Romanov is, I think he's a bit of a mental midget. He has some quit in him. I think we need to build him up. So let's give him some more fights that he can win. Get his confidence going and let him feel good about himself. And then maybe work a little harder, shave off a few more pounds, and then be a little bit more of a contender next time he works his way to the upper echelon fighters in the division. Then we had the first leg of the safety parlay. Youssef Zalal taking on Jack Shore. Listen, I got to tell you, I was sweating this one. The first round, it looked like Jack Shore won that round. Jack Shore had 2 takedowns in that round. I bet the under 2 takedowns on Bet Online. Luckily, the exact number means it's a push. So if he had 1 takedown, the bet would have hit. If he had 3 takedowns, the bet would have missed. He had 2. The line was 2. It's a push. I got a refund on that bet, thankfully. And especially because this was a bet that I placed yesterday, late last night on Friday. I was just looking at it, and I was like, Youssef's going to dominate here. He's going to finish Jack Shore. Jack's not going to get multiple takedowns. I wish the line was 2.5. That would have hit. But luckily, I got a refund. And I will say, what ends up happening many times is those last-minute bets I add don't usually do well. So luckily, refund, I'll take it all day. But Jack had some success early, and not just with 2 takedowns. He also was landing very good strikes, like clean, effective strikes. A few of them looked hard, and I was like, oh, man, here we go. We're going to start to have problems here. And then ultimately in the second round, Youssef lands a wild knee, completely drops Jack Shore, and then he pounces, grapples, rose from there, and then ultimately gets a submission. He gets the arm triangle that Cody Gibson couldn't. So now we have a returning Youssef Zalal. He was cut last year from the UFC. He has come back. He now has 3 wins in a row, 3 submissions in a row, 2 of them over very good high-level opponents, Billy Q and Jack Shore. How good is Youssef Zalal? I don't know. And we're going to find out because I feel like he's a guy they're going to keep pushing and keep rushing because he's now exciting. He wasn't that exciting his first stint in the UFC. He is now exciting, and he's making stuff happen. And the other thing that happened in this fight, go back and watch it. His post-fight speech, he shouted out Jacob, our Jacob from We Want Picks. Problem is, adrenaline was flowing, and Youssef said, shout out to my boy Jacob at Pick'ems, at We Want Pick'ems. So he didn't quite nail We Want Picks, but it was right there, and he was talking about Jacob. Youssef's been on our show. Him and Jacob talk all the time. So, we appreciate the shout out for sure. Certainly Jacob does. I mean, it would have been nice if you said the right company, but hey, we'll take what we can get. And I am curious to see what they do next with this guy because Youssef has looked absolutely spectacular. His last 2 fights, he was the base of the safety parlay, and both times he's delivered. Then we had an absolute barn burner. This was the first bet that I missed. I bet on Victor Henry. My whole thing was, Charles Jourdain's not that good. He's coming down in weight at 135 because he didn't really have success at 145. What's he going to do? And he looked good. He won that first round. He was losing the second round. If this made its way to a decision, which it almost did, if this made its way to a decision, then I don't know what was going to happen. And when I say almost did, I mean almost got through the second round. It was going to be 1-1 going into the third for sure. First round, Charles Jourdain was able to have some success with the busy, exciting, spinning, crazy striking. Second round, Victor Henry got a takedown. Had a bunch of grappling success on the ground. And what's annoying is Charles Jourdain kept just looking for a lazy guillotine, putting stuff in there, just grab and squeeze and working. And it seemed meaningless. Didn't seem like it was going to do anything. Didn't seem like it was going anywhere. And I think what ended up happening is black belt Victor Henry, he is a jiu-jitsu black belt. I think black belt Victor Henry was like, I'm fine. I'll be fine. And then there was a little bit of a scramble, and Charles Jourdain does what he does. He snatched something up in a scramble. So he looked good. He looked good. This was a very typical Charles Jourdain fight, and then a typical Charles Jourdain win if he's going to win. He came out exciting, spinning, jumping, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Then was getting beat with clean technique. And then in a scramble, snatched something up. I think the win is great for Charles. Hopefully he can reinvent himself in a new weight class. He looked good. He didn't look like he was slowing down. He didn't look tired. So maybe this is the weight class he belongs at. And maybe he'll have a ton of success here, and I hope he does. And Victor Henry, well, Victor Henry didn't look bad either. Obviously, he was getting touched a little bit. But then once he got that takedown, he completely took over. The problem for Victor is he's not a young man. He's a little older. So he doesn't necessarily have a bunch of time to reinvent himself, if you will. But I don't think this loss takes anything away from Victor per se. And the win certainly adds to a exciting guy in Charles Jourdain. Then we had an absolute barn burn. This was a slug fight. We had two guys trying to take each other's heads off. We had Aiemann Zahabi taking on Pedro Munhoz. This was an absolute back and forth war. This was another very close fight that could have gone either direction. If this isn't in Canada, I don't know if Zahabi wins it, but this was a good, exciting fight. I mean, not only was this back and forth, this wasn't even like, oh, fighter A won the first round, fighter B won the second, come down to the third. This was exchange to exchange. Pedro Munhoz would come forward, land nice, clean exchange. Then Aiemann Zahabi would come forward, land an exchange, and then spam a head kick. He was spamming head kicks for some reason. I don't know why, but he was spamming head kicks. And then Pedro Munhoz, I mean, it was a straight up back and forth slug fight. It was a very exciting fight. I don't know who got the fight of the night bonuses. Hopefully these two were included because they worked their asses off. They came forward. Pedro Munhoz was smiling. And just reminding people like, hey, I'm a little older, but I'm a fun guy to watch. And he absolutely is. And he brought something out of Aiemann because Aimann's not typically a fun guy to watch. He does have some power hidden in there, but this is a good back and forth fight. I think they gave the nod to Aiemann because Pedro showed a little more damage on the face, and that's obviously something you can see, and that might matter, and it's a hometown crowd. The Jamey-Lyn Horth decision certainly puts some things in your head, but this was a great fight. Very fun, very back and forth. Not really any boring exchanges. I loved this fight. I was happy that Pedro went out there, fought his ass off. He hasn't had the best of luck over the last couple of years. So hopefully the UFC saw it like, hey, he's good. Keep him on the roster. Let's just, we'll keep throwing him at some people. He's a fun guy to watch, and he's a consummate professional. Then we had Mike Malott looking to get back in the win column, and he did. Should he have, though? This was another very, very close fight. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know. This was very close. I mean, I guess you could give Mike Malott the fight if you just zoom out and look at the fight as a whole. But you kind of got to score it by rounds. And if you're looking at the fight, what I saw was a tentative Trevin Giles who didn't throw as much as he should. But when he did throw, he connected. And it just looked like Trevin Giles was the better fighter. Did it not? I mean, Mike Malott fake attempted a few takedowns and just sort of bailed on those. And even when he fake attempted, Trevin Giles was ready. And Trevin Giles did not let his hands go. But when he did throw something, it connected. Mike Malott was the one that had a little bit of damage. Nothing crazy, but he had a little bit of damage. Trevin didn't. Trevin seemed faster. He seemed fresher. He seemed ready to go. Trevin was, when his hands left, was the more accurate of the two. Mike Malott also spamming. 3 different Canadians are spamming head kicks. Aiemann Zahabi, Mike Malott, and Jasmine. We'll talk about Jasmine in a second. And I don't know why, but they all were. So I'm fine with Mike Malott winning, especially because I had him in a little bit of a parlay. But this was a very, very, very close fight. And I don't think you watch this fight and say, okay, that Neil Magny loss was a fluke. Mike Malott is on his come up. He's on the way back. He's definitely a guy we need to push the hell out of. I think you watch it and say, okay, I'm the UFC. I'm trying to build stars. Mike Malott's a really good-looking dude from a very big market. And he's got a ton of finishes. Obviously not this fight, but he's got a ton of finishes. And if I'm the UFC, I'm like, that fight was closer than it should have been. We set him up to succeed, and he needed a little bit of help from the judges. So I think you got to take your time with him too. I think you have to be very careful who you give Mike Malott next. He didn't seem to trust his wrestling. He barely tried. He did let his hands go, and he wasn't afraid to get hit. But Trevin Giles isn't necessarily a powerful guy. Nice, accurate jab, though. So overall, I think this was a good fight just to know where everybody is. It wasn't the most exciting fight on the card, but it was very close. Let me know. I'm curious. Let me know in the comments if I'm being too harsh or not. I got to tell you, I watched 99% of this fight card on my phone. My daughter's birthday was on Halloween. Today was her birthday party. After her birthday party, a bunch of families went out to eat. And then after we went out to eat, we went to, this area and got some drinks, whatever. So I literally was just sitting there with my phone propped up on the table, watching my phone. So two things happen when I do that. I don't get commentary because I'm not going to play the audio for everybody, which I don't mind watching fights without commentary. So I don't have to hear any. What I don't like about it is I miss interesting facts, but I also don't get influenced by their opinions. I just get to see with my eyes what's happening and make a decision. The other thing that happens when you do that is obviously you miss some of the intricacies because sometimes the announcers will point something out that you didn't necessarily see or notice. So I'm curious if I'm being a little harsh here. Was this as close as I thought it was, or was it just a much wider fight and he absolutely should have won a decision and there was no questions about it? Then we had an absolute banger. And it wasn't a banger the whole time because almost immediately, Dustin Stoltzfus had Marc-Andre brought a little bit of trouble, had him on the ground, and was just working from there. So we had most of the first round, let's say 4 minutes of the first round, Dustin Stoltzfus dominating the grappling. He's a big, strong guy making stuff happen. Then we get, with 40 seconds left in the first round, Marc-Andre works some weird scramble, explodes out of there, and says, let me bite down on my mouthpiece and make this happen. And they don't do a Max Holloway with a point to the floor, but it's basically a Max Holloway. And they're swinging. And Marc-Andre thought he did something. And then he's the one who got clipped. And he's the one who got dropped and ultimately put out and finished. So Dustin Stoltzfus, the guy who we all said is the chinnier of the two, got the better of Marc-Andre because Marc-Andre said, let's fight. Pointed to the ground, let's fight. He didn't actually point to the ground. That's a figure of I'm just painting a picture here, right? I'm the Bob Ross of explaining MMA fights. So Marc-Andre went out on his shield, but this is an unfortunate little skid that he's on. And there's now 2 knockouts in a row, and he was typically a somewhat durable guy. Or is it 3? It might be 3 knockouts in a row. Definitely 2. Joe Pyfer definitely just did it. So now the question becomes, is Marc-Andre's chin done? And if his chin is done, what does that mean for his career? So I'm curious to see what happens next. I'm actually happy for Dustin. I didn't have a bet on this fight, thank God. I'm happy for Dustin. Dustin's a big guy. He works hard. He's got all the skills and just seems to keep getting screwed. Losing to good guys, right? His losses are all quality. And he's beating the guys he should beat, and I guess this was another one. So ultimately, this was an awesome fight. The exchange was great. I just kept rewinding it and showing it to people. I'm like, dude, watch this exchange. And I would start it on the ground because the ground is where we got the scramble from Marc-Andre. Then he got up, he felt free, and he's like, I'm just going to make something happen. I'm going to try to boom, done. That sucks to go out like that. And then we had Jazzy. Listen, Jasmine Jasudavicius was the second half of the safety parlay. So obviously, when she finished Ariana Lipski or Ariana Da Silva, I was pumped. I was happy. I was excited. Thank you. Safety parlay hit 1 unit on a plus money safety parlay. The 4th safety parlay in a row at plus money. The 5th in a row overall. So very pleased, but also disappointed because she got the submission 3 seconds before the over 2.5 would have hit. And I had a half a unit on the 2 lady overs. I had over 2.5 on the Jamey-Lyn Horth fight and then over 2.5 on here. I parlayed them together. Thankfully, I only put a half a unit. If I put more than that, there would have been a problem. Thankfully, that wasn't in a safety parlay either. Sometimes I do tend to do round overs on women in the safety parlay. But I have been backing off of that recently because round lines seem to be going wild. We're getting finishes from Jasmine Jasudavicius in the third round. So yeah, I don't necessarily trust round overs like I used to, and thank God I don't, because we would have been screwed here. But 3 seconds was the difference. 3. And she tapped. This wasn't even like the referee, some discretion. Like, no. She straight up tapped before the 2.5. Because I was watching, I was counting, and you can see right there on the clock. It's like, gosh, so close. Overall, Ariane Lipski was clearly the better striker. Clearly. She was having success striking. She was landing big shots. Jasmine's got a chin on her because Ariane Lipski landed clean a few times. But once Jasmine got her hands on her, in a single, in a double, on the ground, any sort of physical, sort of like grappling type contact, it was a one-way train. Jasmine dumped her on the ground like it was not a care in the world, and then dominated on the ground. Just absolutely flowed, rained down strikes. She had her in a crucifix at one point. Like, it wasn't even remotely close on the ground. Jasmine absolutely smoked her. I figured that's what was going to happen. That's why I put in the safety parlay. People tried to scare me out of it. People loved Ariane Lipski this week. I just wasn't feeling it. I don't know why people were all over her this week. And then it does seep into your brain, right? I make the beauty of me being the first in this space to put out a meaningful prediction video. There's obviously people that put the shit out a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of time for no reason whatsoever. Buying views. It's stupid. Anyway, I digress. The beauty of being one of the first people, or the first meaningful video to come out every single week, and if you don't know, every single Sunday morning, you will get a breakdown of the next card. UFC Vegas 100. I have all my picks. They're on the website. I've got my bets already. They're on the website. I've got my notes. They are on the website. And in the morning, I'm going to record that breakdown. I have no outside influence whatsoever. I haven't heard a single other person's opinion because I'm the first person with an opinion for the most part on those cards. So the beauty of that is I can just see things clear as day and make my mind up. That's what I did with Jasmine. I knew she was going to be in the safety parlay. I just didn't know if it was going to be her and Mike Malott or her and somebody else. But then as the week goes on, I got to hear Ariane Lipski. Oh, I think Lipski. And then that other people's nonsense seeps into your brain. You start to absorb it. Doubt yourself. Luckily, I didn't let it change my mind. She looked great. Jasmine looked great. She basically always looks good. The only fight she didn't look good in was 2 of them. Tracy Cortez, who's very good, and Karine Silva, who's phenomenal. Great job. Listen, I got to be honest with this fight, the Brinson Ribeiro and the Caio Machado fight. I was playing cornhole, okay? I was playing cornhole. I wasn't completely dialed in. What I did see seemed like a back and forth kind of fight, but it looked to me that Brinson was the one landing the more meaningful strikes. He was having the more meaningful actions, the more meaningful connections. So to me, the amount of attention that I gave this fight, it looked like Ribeiro won. So when they raised his hand, I wasn't surprised. When I saw a split, I was like, I must have missed something. Like, what did I miss that made it kind of go the other way? Or was that some Homer influence? Because while he has the Brazilian flag, Caio Machado has spent a good chunk of his adult life in Canada. So I know they think of him as their own. He looked good, though. Caio Machado has come down to 205. He was a heavyweight. This fight was at 205. He looked pretty good. Physically, he looked good. He seemed fast, didn't seem to slow down, was busy, took a shot. Overall, he looked pretty good. It just didn't seem to be enough because Ribeiro seemed to be the one with the bigger actions that was landing more meaningful. So I might go back and rewatch this. I don't know if I need to, but I did not spend a ton of time on this one. I did, however, watch every second of this fight. I got to tell you a couple things. One, you people couldn't wait a half a second to be like, I told you Blanchfield there. Listen, first of all, Rose Namajunas won those first 2 rounds. And those first 2 rounds looked exactly what I thought this entire fight would look like. Erin doesn't have good takedowns, and she didn't really try that many in the first 2 rounds. I think her What was the total stat? 3 for 12 or something like that. So again, not good, statistically speaking. But I said Erin Blanchfield doesn't have very good takedowns. She's not very technical in her striking, but she is tough as shit, and she will just continue to move forward. And I thought Rose would just be a little faster, a little cleaner, have the better technique. And that is what we saw for 2 full rounds. That is exactly what we saw. It's exactly what we saw. Rose was clean. She was fast. She was landing the strikes, moving around. Third round, though, she did end up on the ground pretty early and couldn't do anything with it. And we knew that was a possibility. Erin Blanchfield's a savage on the ground. Nobody has ever said otherwise. She's an absolute savage on the ground. She had phenomenal control on the ground. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't like rushed to try to get a finish. And that is what saved her here, because if she was rushing to try to get a finish in any of the last 3 rounds, I mean, that's how this fight went. Rose won the first 2, lost the next 3. And if there was any panic on the Erin side, like, oh, I might be down, I better get a finish, she would have tried a little too hard. Rose would have worked her way out and stolen a round. So the reason Erin won this fight, in my opinion, is because on the ground, she was more control-centric than she was finish-centric. She wasn't trying to finish this fight. She was controlling. And she had Rose Namajunas in some bad positions. Because, again, on the ground, Erin Blanchfield's a beast. But her takedowns need a lot of work. Let's keep in mind, Rose Namajunas is a 115-pounder that moved up to 125. Amanda Ribas tossed Rose around like it was no big deal. Erin struggled with it a little bit. She was getting those takedowns stuffed. Rose was moving. Rose's takedown defense did look better than it ever has. I'm sure they worked on it. But this was a very good fight for both of them. It was a good fight for Erin Blanchfield because she just beat a former world champion. She came back after a loss. I didn't see any improvements. Did you see improvements? And I know there's a bunch of the Erin Blanchfield fans are like delusional. They didn't see anything wrong with her to begin with, let alone things to improve on. But I am curious, did you guys see improvements? Like if we go back to the Mannon fight, where she basically got pieced the hell up, the issue was her striking wasn't good enough to hang with Mannon, and her takedowns were dog shit. That was the issue. I didn't see much improvement. Now, she did have a couple of takedowns in this fight, but Rose is a little small. The striking didn't look meaningfully better, so it's hard to tell. But this was a phenomenal win for Erin. It was not controversial at all. She won 3 rounds very, very clearly, and I'm glad that it wasn't controversial. And honestly, it's better for the division for Erin to win. She's young. She's more talented as far as just like raw talent and what could happen in the future is concerned. This minute in time, the better technical fighter is Rose. But obviously, every time Rose got on the ground, she couldn't do much with it. The best part was, though, I was feeling myself. I'll be honest with you. I was feeling myself in the first, I think it was the first round, maybe it was the second, when Erin had Rose against the cage and she shot like an actual takedown, and Rose tossed her ass, ended up on top, and Rose got the takedown. I was like, oh, baby. We're in for it. In a good way. And that's not how it went down. So I had 2 bets on this fight. I had Rose money line. That was plus whatever the hell. Then I had Erin, and that was a half a unit. Then I had Erin Blanchfield inside the distance decision, no action at a full unit. And I felt like that was a perfect bet situation because I genuinely thought Rose was going to win. But I also fully recognize how dangerous Erin is on the ground. I didn't really, I wasn't worried about Erin getting finished because of how tough she was. So I knew worst case scenario, I'm getting a refund on that inside the distance decision, no action bet. Best case, it'll pay. In this case, I got a full refund and I lost a half unit on the Rose money line. But congratulations for Erin. It's better for the division for her to be good. I want to see her shooting beautiful blast doubles. Pick some bitches up and slam them down. You are so freaking good on the ground. You are so freaking tough. If she got good takedowns, she could do whatever the hell she wanted to do to anybody in any of these divisions. And then we had the main event of the evening. Brandon Moreno wins a very straightforward fight against Amir Albazi. So I got the co-main and the main wrong. Luckily, picks and bets are not the same thing. I didn't bet anything on the main event. And yeah, I bet on the co-main event and lost a half unit there, but all the bets on the rest of the card more than covered. It was a good fight. It wasn't amazing, but it was a good fight. Amir Albazi didn't seem to do what he needed to do. Meaning, He had a few nice exchanges. He threw with power a couple of times. A, he didn't wrestle nearly as much as he should have. And B, he seemed to struggle with Brandon Moreno's range. And Brandon Moreno looked good. He won this fight. He was starting to feel himself. He was taking over as the fight went on. But I will still venture to say, Brandon Moreno, all right, let's put it this way. The announcers, Twitter, everybody, he's back. Assassin Baby is back. I don't think that was the best version of Brandon Moreno. Do you think that was that good of a version of Brandon Moreno? I don't think he dominated. Obviously, he literally set records or significant strikes and all that stuff. But to me, it just felt like Amir wasn't doing enough and Brandon exploited those pieces. But if that was Brandon Royval in there, again, a guy with the volume of him, Moreno might have struggled with it. So Moreno looked very good with his typical, like, awkward striking, super long. He steps into things. He's super long. He looked really good doing that. But he didn't have, like, the volume we used to him having. He didn't have the diversity we were used to him having. And the one shot I saw where I was like, this is over for Brandon. Might have been the first round or the second round. Amir Albazi landed a leg kick. One, all by itself. And Brandon Moreno was basically sat down. And Amir didn't go back to that leg kick. And it was crazy to me. Because, like, you just basically sat him down. You need to be going back to that leg kick. And he didn't. And I know this sounds like I'm taking stuff away from Brandon. I'm not taking anything away from Brandon Moreno. For him to have lost his belt, lost 2 close decisions in a row. I thought he won the last decision against Royval. I had him in the safety parlay, I believe. If it wasn't safety, it was definitely a regular parlay. So I was a little bitter about that. But he didn't look himself. He looked flat. This almost felt the same, except he got the win. He didn't look like the 3 year ago Brandon Moreno, but he still got the win. And I'm happy for him. It's probably better for the division if Amir won, right? You get the nasty prospect. That's better for the division. But Brandon Moreno clawing his way back, being like such a likable guy and such a fun, exciting guy to watch, and from Mexico, a giant fight country, that's obviously important as well. Amir Albazi, back to the drawing board. Maybe this was too much too soon. I mean, we knew he had neck surgery. We knew he had heart surgery. We just didn't think it would matter. So this might be too much too soon for Amir Albazi. He didn't look bad, but he didn't look great. This could also be just karma for winning that Kai Kara-France decision that he shouldn't have won. But overall, this is a good card. Good main event. Good card overall. Again, we made some money. Here's the results. 4 units of net profit. 4 units of net profit. Go check Twitter. Go tell me how your favorite capper did. I promise they fucking sucked. And they sucked last week, and they sucked the week before that, and they sucked the week before that. Not us, though. Up 9 of the last 10 cards. The only card that we weren't up in the last 10 cards was UFC Paris. If you do want to unlock all the picks, the bets, the tools, and everything else for UFC Vegas 100, UFC 309, UFC China, everything, it's $10 for an entire month. This very second on the website. I have several bets ready to go for UFC Vegas 100. All the tools are up. Everything is ready to go. Those tools include the data analyzer. This is going to give you every data point you could ever want or need for every fight the rest of the year. And then you can filter those data points. You can export the data. You can click a button and watch the actual fights yourself to do your own research. You can get the line movement tracker, opening odds, current odds, win probability, line movement for every fighter on every card. You're going to get the prop hunter. This is a curated set of data specifically designed to help you find prop bets. You're going to get the DraftKings optimizer preloaded with the best DraftKings owner projections in the game. And you're going to get more than just me, Jacob. You're going to get Artem giving you his PFL, Bellator, UFC picks, bets, and breakdowns, and the artificial intelligence. All of this shit and a bunch of other things that I didn't mention available right now. WeWantPicks.com. Click Become a Member at the top. And finally, if you sign up with any one of our sportsbook affiliates, we'll send you $50. WeWantPicks.com/bets. You click the link, you sign up, you make a deposit. We send you $50 as a thank you. Guys, hopefully you did as well as we did this card. We are closing in on 4,000 premium members. And hopefully all 3950 or whatever the hell it is of you did as well as we did. Thank you so much for absolutely everything. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, which is why I'm blinking like this, because my contacts are ridiculously dry. But I will be up bright and early, ready to go, filming the UFC Vegas 100 breakdown.